Just 24 hours after the inauguration of Donald Trump as president for a second term, a press conference was called announcing Stargate. This took many MAGA supporters by surprise. Following an inauguration address that seemed to give the core voters what they demanded, I asked Mary Finch if she thought Trump 2.0 might be replacing globalism with
I am
technocracy.
slightly surprised that Trump once again revealed his true colours so quickly. I was anticipating a bit more of a delay, but he was right there on day two. And also, as some have pointed out, even at the inauguration ceremony itself, when you had Eric Trump doing the Masonic hand sign and all these other kind of little tells. I've never been on Team Trump. Right back in 2016, I was saying, look, he's going to get in. You're supposed to think it's rigged for Hillary, so that when Trump gets in, we feel that we've won an important victory. And as they say, a football team is most vulnerable to conceding a goal when they've just scored one, because when you feel victorious, you become complacent and you go off your guard. And we
Mm.
saw that happen. Trump then went on to launch Operation Warp Speed and become the father of the vaccine. And many of his supporters were kind of contort themselves in these mental knots, trying to defend him in a way that they never would have done with Hillary. So I said, and in fact, so did Robert F. Kennedy. We'll get on to him in a minute, but I said, look, a second Trump term isn't going to be any different. He's just a deceiver. He's just an actor, and he's just he's enticing you with bait, lulling you into a false sense of security because he wants your vote. And then when he's in, he's just going to reveal himself as completely evil, just like everybody at that level of politics.
Mm.
Um, I mean, I find it, distressing, but also interesting to watch what's happening to the MAGA supporters and how they're trying to justify his behavior. So I've heard, of course, that it's 5D chess, that it's spiritual warfare. Someone's quoted the art of war, that these are all military tactics he's doing to eventually, expose
Mm.
the bad guys. Um, and it's sad to see, but the elite understand human psychology implicitly, and they know that once someone's put a hero icon on this kind of pedestal, they will tie themselves in ever more convoluted knots trying to defend that person rather than acknowledge actually they've been fooled.
Yeah, because I read a Substack this morning. I tweeted it earlier. Obviously, a big MAGA supporter, and obviously very, very conflicted, as quite a few of them are, because you had Steve Bannon, for example, hosting various guests after the Larry Ellison press conference. And again, questioning whether this was anything to do with MAGA. We didn't. This was a complete curveball. We didn't know this was coming. Um, but this particular writer was suggesting that Trump is not MAGA. MAGA, in many respects, is a kind of a groundswell movement. It's people who wanted to see change, to turn away from the woke nonsense and the globalist agenda. And of course, he gave them everything that they wanted, including myself. I thought, well, this is marvelous, a rejection of DEI and woke and so on. Even people like David Curtin were tweeting at the time, fabulous, this is absolutely the direction we wanted them to take. And literally within 24 hours, there was that press conference, So is it the case, you think, that he is bedazzled by the billionaires who are driving the policy agenda? Or is it the fact that he really doesn't have any say? He's just along for the ride. As you say, he's an actor and mouthing the words, but actually has no real agency.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, there's that phrase, politics is show business for ugly people. And they do really mean it literally, as in, high profile politics is just another arm of Hollywood. And you should no more think that you've seen an authentic portrayal of Donald Trump because you've watched him on a screen giving a speech, then you would think you've seen an authentic portrayal of Sean Connery because you've watched him in James Bond. So I think the social architects who are driving the world in the direction they want it to go. First of all, it's in their interests to stay behind the scenes, to not be a recognizable face, to not be a recognizable name, to be able to walk past them the street and wouldn't know who they were for obvious, kind of personal safety reasons. But also, a lot of these guys are, not charismatic. They haven't got the slick media personalities. They're not dynamic and appealing. And the actor class is. That's why the actor class is, high profile actors in top sitcoms and top movies are paid quite so much. It's because they're so powerful at getting the social engineers message across in a way that the social engineers themselves couldn't do. I mean, look at someone like Yuval Harari. I mean, he's not dynamic, he's not appealing, he's not going to get the kind of traction behind him that someone like Trump, who's this larger than life gregarious guy, will get. So I think absolutely, for these high level political roles, they pick talented actors. And that's all Trump is. He's just an actor. He has scripts handed to him. He memorizes them. He reads them. That's it.
Yeah. And the other element of this whole debate is the extent to which the elite is driving the debate. There is a strand of argument within the MAGA camp, for example, that they were hoping that Trump 2.0 was going to be the final break from, and they refer to a kind of a British royal family involvement in the elite and the driving of the policy agenda, the globalist policy agenda in particular. And they felt that Trump 2.0 was going to be an opportunity to get away from this sort of royal family, as they describe it, domination. That could mean, obviously, the Rothschilds and the intergenerationally wealthy families that are sort of pulling the strings in the background, and also the Zionists. But of course, there is a big strand of Zionism within Trump, the Trump team, and even within MAGA. Steve Bannon, while he didn't like the whole idea of the creation of this new panopticon, thing. Is also an ardent Zionist, and of course, a lot of Zionists have funded Trump's campaign. I mean, you described it in a chat I watched the other day as like engaging in a game of 5D chess. It's just very difficult to understand who is driving the agenda and what role that Trump plays, and of course Musk plays in all of this. Can you figure it out for us?
Well, my contention is that they really are just actors, and it's possible, and even probable that they have some personal affiliation with Zionism. For instance, Donald Trump's daughter married a hardcore Zionist and converted to Judaism. So I don't reject that they do support Zionism, but I don't think that they have the brains for the complex strategy and all the psychological operations that the real social engineers have launched. I just don't think that's in their skill set. Elon Musk, for instance, supposedly is this super genius inventor who runs all these companies and so on and so forth, but he seems to have all the time in the world to tweet endlessly and go to these starry parties. And, I'm not convinced that he's anything more than a front of house showman, just like Donald Trump. So I really do feel that these people are literally puppets, and they even will adjust their appearance, like actors will change their appearance for different roles. So someone pointed out to me the other day with Leo Biddle. I don't know if you know him, but he pointed out Donald Trump's hair has changed color in all the run up to the inauguration. He had this great big bouffant kind of orange hair, and then at the inauguration his hair was grey. And this is giving us subconscious messaging. You see that he's actually an old man and he might not be here for the full term, which I don't think he will be, but we can get onto that. And when I look closely at his face, I wonder if he's wearing some kind of prosthetics, or that there's some attempts to change his appearance, but he definitely has changed his hair. So I don't believe that they are meaningfully involved at a personal level in shaping the agenda, but I do certainly believe that they're sympathetic to it. Otherwise, they wouldn't play these parts.
Yeah, but it does seem, though, that there are certain, fairly cataclysmic breakdowns in the messaging from time to time. Because obviously, even if they are all the deliverers, like Trump and Musk and so on, of the various messaging that's determined for them, are human beings, and also the people who are defining the messaging behind the scenes are human beings as well, unless of course they're AIs. We don't quite know, might be, but it doesn't seem to have a sort of logical consistency, even though we know most of it is a psyop. there does seem to be the emergence of a bunch of camps. Now, obviously, we have to take a lot of what's in the public domain with a pinch of salt, but we have had a few sort of publicly defined schisms within the camps, the various camps. For example, there was the schism between Nigel Farage and Musk when Farage was over at Mar-a-Lago schmoozing around and got into conversations with Musk, and then Musk announced that Farage wasn't the man for the job, and of course this all related to the grooming gangs and so on, which Musk had thrown like a curveball into the UK political debate. Can you kind of unpack that one for us?
Well, my feeling on that again is that it's staged because Reform are coming in for a lot of criticism by saying they're being controlled by Elon Musk. Why does Elon Musk have all this say over British politics? Why does he get to influence their party direction? Now he's even wanting to influence who the leader of Reform is. Now, if Nigel Farage is able to successfully say, which he seems to have done, well, I'm sorry that Elon thinks that, but it's not his decision, and I am going to stay the leader of Reform, then he can plausibly present the idea that actually he's not controlled by Elon Musk, he's not controlled by foreign money, because these foreign interest groups tried to oust him and they failed. So I think that was what the point of that little operation was. And I think it was all staged and acted, and both Farage and Musk were in on it, and they remain, best pals behind the scenes. So I don't think Farage will be ousted. I don't think, I do think Reform are going to be swept to kind of a landslide victory, but I don't think they can do that under anyone else other than Farage. I'm absolutely sure that American politicians know that, and that this was a little publicity stunt, really, just for Nigel Farage to underline, I am my own man, I'm not controlled by anyone.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that relates to another schism, though, that's happened as well, because after the Stargate press conference, there was then a public spat between Musk and Sam Altman of OpenAI. Now, of course, again, it's been suggested that the reason why they may well have wanted to arrange the Stargate press conference is that they knew exactly what the response was going to be, particularly by the hardcore MAGA lot, and particularly the sort of and the Maha lot as well. So Musk comes out and sort of says that they've got no money, and that one of the participants in the funding has only raised 10 billion or something when they announced it as a 500 billion pound project. Could that be that they essentially announced early so that Musk could be seen to be the sort of shining knight, riding in to put right this ridiculous plan?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely plausible, and that they stage these kind of things, but to build certain people up, make them more credible, make them appear more trustworthy. Yeah, absolutely, that's totally plausible.
So, who do you think, though? Just to return to this, if they are all actors and they're all playing their particular parts, and I agree with you about Musk. What is the nature of the coven above them defining the agenda? Who's in that?
So I think we know some of the names of the families. There's the 13 families, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Sinclairs. I think all these intergenerational families have been very powerful for a long time. And I also know something that they do is they have their children adopted and brought up by different families with different names. So we can't quite see what a small number of families it is actually controlling things behind the scenes. And I believe that if you study the family connections, you see that every single US president, except for one, has been related to the UK royal family. So, it is, we say it's a big club, but actually it's quite small at the highest levels. And I do believe there's a very important Zionist element. A lot of the people running the show are kind of Jewish supremacists, and they're running on a bit of a spiritual script, and they believe that when a certain level of destruction and depravity has been induced, then their Messiah will return. So I think that is a key reason. Because sometimes people think, well, why do they so blatantly want to destroy the world? And I think there is a kind of convoluted spiritual explanation there. But it is very telling that in MAGA and Reform as well, there is a lot of support for Zionism. And Zionism, unfortunately, has been conflated with kind of nationalist movements and more right-wing sensibilities. And so these Zionists come out and say, yeah, isn't the woke ideology crazy? Aren't these communists awful? We should have national sovereignty. And a lot of people, in the conspiracy community go, well, hey, yeah, that sounds great. And that's kind of the bait to entice you in. And then comes the poison. But we must at all costs protect Israel. We must support Israel's right to defend itself and bomb the Middle East to smithereens. So my working theory at the current time, is that we've already seen 2 supposed assassination attempts on Donald Trump, which I think was staged, but they have been accredited, at least in some loose way, to Iran, like saying at least one of the would-be assassins had links to Iran. So my thoughts are that Donald Trump will not do the full term because he will be quote unquote assassinated. I don't think it will be real, but we'll be told it's real. And that will be blamed on Iran. And then that would be all the ignition America needed to go to war with Iran. It would get the support of Europe, not least because the UK at the moment, we've got all this focus on the grooming gangs and this terrible abuse that they perpetrated on white girls. And also we've got this Southport Axel guy, very, very prominently in the press, who was a Muslim convert. Mm-hmm. So, this enormous outrage and fury directed towards Muslims is being whipped up on purpose by the press, so that when there's this one final explosive incident, which I think will be Iran supposedly assassinating Trump, the people are going to get behind the UK government and the US government going to war with Iran, because they'll say, enough is enough. These terrible savages have been abusing us for this time, and it's time that we showed them a lesson. And then that enables the Israel lobby to defend its genocide in Gaza by saying, you see, this is what we have to put up with. This is why we have to bomb Gaza and all the Middle Eastern countries. So that is the way I see it's going. And it's interesting you said earlier that MAGA isn't really Donald Trump. And I, in fact, agree with you. And there's been a lot of press, both before the inauguration and after, that the future of MAGA is J.D. Vance. So there's an enormous age gap between J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. It's nearly 40 years. And Donald Trump's actually the oldest president to ever take office. And a lot has been made of this in the press. And they're saying that's why he's doing everything so quickly. He knows that he's quite elderly, that he's not going to live forever. So even if it's not an assassination, maybe we'll be told he just died of old age. I think they want to hand the reins over to J.D. Vance. And they can't be confident of a J.D. Vance victory in 2028. And that's quite a long way away. I think they want him in place sooner. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, because it must take its toll as well. I have written on the New Era about this before. But for example, if you take Bill Gates, Bill Gates is supposedly a multi-billionaire, and yet all we do is see him traipsing around various television studios, going to very unremarkable places, having to do interviews about global warming and all this nonsense and vaccination. So it would indicate that either they've got a huge amount of compromise on him, probably as a result of his involvement with Epstein, or he does it for the love of it. But I can't believe that that's really the case. But the same thing applies to Trump. And Melania as well. I think it was very telling, the fact that Melania had the hat on. We couldn't really see her face very well. Trump couldn't even give her a kiss, at the start of the inauguration, because I think she just wants to be out of it as much as possible. She's not doing any public activities. She's very much a trophy bride, isn't she, there at the wings? But it must have a burden on Trump. He is, as you say, an old man. He often must have to say to his handlers, I am sick to the high teeth with this. We know he was financially supported, like he had a number of financial bailouts. Essentially, his business empire is a sham. He's a terrible businessman. He keeps being bailed out. But he has arrived where he is. He was on The Apprentice. He does have a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But there must come a point where he says, I've had enough. I want the hell out of this. So I'll give you a second term. I'll give you Trump 2.0, but I need an exit. Do Do you think that's what the game is currently?
Yes, absolutely. I think that these assets, these agents, they have a contract, and like everyone else who's employed and has a contract, they have a point where they retire. And I think that Donald Trump has a deal where he says, yes, I'll work up until this age, but then I want to be, killed off, given a new identity, off to a nice island somewhere I can enjoy my retirement, enjoy my wealth in peace. And I think Melania has a contract too, that she is very much a show wife. And apparently, every time Trump's been elected, she's renegotiated her prenup. So basically, she refuses to even pose in these pictures as the first lady until she's effectively paid. So I think that her contract is soon to run out too. And then obviously, when Trump supposedly dies, she'll be allowed to go off and live her life freely, and she's still relatively young, and she can go off and have a whole life. So absolutely, I think you're right, and I think that happens to other assets. I wrote an article about Michael Mosley, the so-called TB doctor who never practiced a single day in his life.
And brilliant it was too. What was your traffic on that article? You must have had so much interest globally.
It was one of the most popular articles I've ever written, and on Substack it had about 35,000 views. And just to put that in context, my articles usually get between 5 and 10,000 views. So it was very widely read. And what I argued about Michael Mosley was that he was an intelligence asset, and he got to 67, which is retirement age, and they killed his character off and gave him a new identity. He can go off and enjoy his retirement in peace, because the story of his so-called death was so ridiculous, and there were so many holes in it. So I think that they absolutely do this to their intelligence assets quite frequently: kill the character off, give them a new identity, off they go, either to retire if they're of that age, or to another role, which what I think happened in the case of Joe Cox, that MP who was supposedly murdered. So yes, exactly right what you're saying about Trump. He's at the end of the line career-wise, and he is soon to be retired. I think if they ever go significantly off script, they're just killed. I think that's what happens to them. John Magufuli, who was the president of Tanzania, and he warned his people COVID is a hoax, don't take the vaccine. And then weeks later, he died. He's only 61, and we're told he died of COVID. So they just whacked him. And Isaac Kappy, when he was telling us what goes on in Hollywood, they suicided him. So I think these guys only ever say what they're allowed to say. And if any meaningful veering off script, and they're gone. I think they do allow them to criticize Israel to a certain extent. I think Elon Musk has as well, because to not do that would be too suspicious. So they're allowed to do it to an extent, but they only do what they're allowed to do.
Was that the reason why he did the Hitler salute?
Right. Yeah, probably, because Elon Musk did a poll about himself. He said Elon Musk is a Zionist shill, A, Zionist shill, B, anti-Semite, C, somehow both. So he did this. So it kind of a troll. It's like he is playing both sides. If he's too pro-Israel, then he will be seen through and just dismissed as a Zionist puppet. And if he was too anti-Semitic, he'd be dismissed as a communist puppet. So he gives us a bit of both.
Yeah, and there's again, you discussed in your chat with Leo the other day. Part of that seemed to be that sort of, was it or wasn't it a Roman salute? That was kind of playing to that idea, that he has to straddle these various stools, So he creates an Overton window, and he gets the debate going on X or Twitter. In order to do that, to be sort of seen to be outside of the swamp and aloof to it as well, and obviously catering to various perspectives on the Twitter platform.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got something for everyone, and he also kind of increases the legitimacy of the Trump administration and people who are allied with it by appearing to be free speech and allowing different perspectives. When we had Joe Biden in government, we were all getting banned all the time off Twitter, Facebook, all these platforms. And now we don't. Now we're allowed to say what we want. Of course, we're not allowed to reach our audience saying it. We'll suppress it's freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. But he does do a passable impression of someone who is free speech and open to different perspectives. I think that's very, very appealing to people, especially after how dystopian and oppressive the COVID years were.
Yeah, and the total capitulation as well of the tech bros. They were all corralled at the inauguration. But they were all there. Zuck was there, looking down the girl's blouse beside him. Uh, they were all there, being sort of very, very politically incorrect all of a sudden. So it seems that they'll do what is required of them, and of course, we know that they in particular are actors. They also were recipients of huge amounts of family wealth. Apparently, the latest is that because the various partners in the Stargate project can't come up with a dosh, Microsoft is going to weigh in. So Bill Gates is going to be back in play once again as part of the MAGA project.
It's just it's so predictable, isn't it? But you touched on Bill Gates earlier. He traipses around all these TV studios and gives these interviews, and it's always struck me about him that he doesn't come across as bright and articulate at all. He's
No.
stumbling and he can't find his words and seems quite stupid. And I suspect because he, like Musk, is another actor who probably has very little, if any, involvement in all these great innovations that have been accredited to him.
Yeah, there was the interview where he was asked about the fact that I can't remember one of the South American nations had loads of trees, and he said, "Well, this what has this got to do with carbon?"
Right.
And there was an interview with his secretary, I think, featured in a biopic about him on Netflix, and the secretary was saying, "Oh yeah, Bill carries around a big bag of books." Because he's always reading. He reads all the time. He's a non-stop reader. And I was like saying, this guy's intelligent. He reads all this stuff. Therefore, he must be really, really intelligent. It was like, this is his prop. This is the prop he needs, the bag of books to prove that he's extraordinarily thought leading. What about the UK then? So clearly the same gameplay is happening in the UK. We had Rishi Sunak, who the Conservatives, or rather the establishment, were determined to put in place as Prime Minister. Then we had the resignation in the rain, where the rain was literally pelting off him, again, very visual. Essentially calling the general election a year too early, where the opinion polls were showing that the Conservatives were going to lose by a landslide in favor of Labour. And of course, prior to Rishi Sunak being appointed, we had Liz Truss being elected. This relates to some of these aberrations that occasionally happen. Because she was elected under the Conservative Party constitution by the members to some extent, she managed to slip through. The woman I worked with her, she isn't the brightest at all. There's no question that she was going to be a useful prime minister, even though she got the popular vote of the Conservative Party membership. So she was an aberration. It was clear that they had to get rid of her immediately, which is exactly what happened. And of course, now Keir Starmer's been put in, who again, like the man might be an actor, but he's a shit one, isn't he? But what's going to play out now? We've got all of this anti-Muslim sentiment playing. We've got the grooming gangs and so on. And as Sonia Poulton pointed out, Musk may have intervened, but of course he didn't intervene to show the totality of child abuse in the United Kingdom, much of it perpetrated by leading members of the British establishment and the royal family, and people like Jimmy Savile and so on. But anyway, regardless, we've got this narrative playing out. Where's it going to go? What's going to happen here, do you think?
I don't think that Starmer will do his full term. There's been a lot of focus on calling a new general election. There was that petition which garnered over 3 million signatures. They did debate it in Parliament. Watched that debate, and Nigel Farage took a leading role in it. And all the time on Twitter, I'm seeing someone else saying Starmer must step down. We need a new general election. So I think his role, as you say, as a very wooden actor, has just been to make himself as absolutely despised as possible. So people kick back against him in the strongest possible terms and demand another election. I think he might resign. That might trigger some kind of crisis of confidence. Another general election is called. I do think that's on the cards. I don't know when. Some people have said 2027, but definitely before 2029. And then I think Reform will just be swept to this incredible victory, because they're getting huge amounts of press attention. They have got, as Nigel Farage has said, this endorsement from Elon Musk, which makes them cool to kind of younger people who might not have voted otherwise. They say, well, if Elon Musk likes these guys, will go out and vote for them. Rupert Lowe has become very popular. He's been very outspoken about the farmers' inheritance tax issue, even though, interestingly, he himself didn't actually vote on it. He didn't turn up to vote. But anyway, he's been very, very outspoken about that. And the grooming gangs, of course, so he's getting a lot of public attention. And I think that Conservatives and Labour have both now made themselves unelectable on purpose, that with having that two-party system destroyed. So basically, when the country goes to the polls, the only serious option that's going to be presented to anyone is Reform. To say that, that's the only option. Anything else is a wasted vote. They're the only people who can get in, the only people who can save us. And Reform will stand a candidate in absolutely every constituency, even if some of their candidates are AI. And it was quite a credible rumor that went around last time that some of their candidates were AI, and that hasn't been proven false to my satisfaction as yet. And it would be very, very possible to stand a candidate as AI, because the process of standing doesn't require you to show to turn up in person and show photo ID. You have to do that to vote now, but you actually don't have to do it to stand as a candidate. So it is absolutely plausible that the candidates could be AI. And I actually think we're moving towards a system where a lot of our politicians will be AI, and we won't know, because I think they're going to scrap these in-person surgeries. I think that the Joe Cox thing and David, I never know if it's David Ames or David Arness, but the other politician who was killed, it's about saying that they're not safe from these crazy nutters, their constituents. In future, we're just going to have consultations over Zoom, stay home, stay safe. Now, if we can't meet our politicians in person, if we only can correspond with them via Zoom, how will we actually know they're real people? So I think that Reform have showed their hand with having formed for that already, probably standing some AI candidates last general election. And we're moving towards a future where, obviously, the level of global deception is already very high. We've got a lot of actors, playing parts and deceiving us, but at least we can be pretty confident that they're real people. I think the level of deception is going to go up a notch. We're being told all the time now that AI is the future. Well, I think we're going to get to a stage quite quickly where we won't be able to know for sure that the people on the screen saying, I'm your prime minister, I'm your MP, or whatever, are actually real and aren't AI. So I think that Reform, with their close links to Musk and all the other tech bros, are probably going to move us further towards that at quite a rapid pace.
So do you think, though, that Starmer's, or the part that he'll be required to play, will be nuanced in any way, or is it? It does seem to me that he's a sort of dead man walking, and has been pretty much since he was elected. His delivery is appalling. He appears to have no real emotional intelligence. There was the talk about him after going to Southport, that he then went to 10 Downing Street and partied or something. There's all of this sort of it couldn't be that bad, I think, is my point. One could not be prime minister and fight a successful election, even though he did get a relatively small percentage of the popular vote. But you could not be that bad. So is it that he has been appointed to be an actor, certainly, but a really, really shit one?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I think it's really critical to understand, that nothing that happens in high level politics is incompetence. Like, you do not become the prime minister of a country, or a very wealthy and powerful, high profile politician because you're incompetent. These people are ruthlessly competent. They know exactly what they're doing. And when they do things that appear to be incompetence, like how you've done this thing, it's so destructive, it's so awful, you must be really stupid. They're not stupid. They've done it because it's so destructive and awful. That's exactly why they've done it. So yeah, absolutely what you say. Keir Starmer has been tasked with appearing just a hate figure. Like, as you say, people can't believe he could legitimately be this bad. And I'd say he isn't legitimately. He's doing what his masters are telling him to make sure that the revulsion towards him is kind of unanimous. I mean, I don't think I've heard anyone at this point say a good word about him. Nobody, whether they're left or right or whatever. Everybody hates him, and that is exactly the purpose of him. So it's problem, reaction, solution.
Yeah, and it's exactly like Rishi Sunak, isn't it? Because we had him resign, even though he had a big majority. He came into office. Yeah, he was appointed clearly into office, but clearly was instructed to stand down. So it's clearly the case that uh, Starmer could be equally instructed to be so grotesquely incompetent that he will have to either resign or terminate his period in office. But therefore, that would indicate that there is an agenda to have a populist, so-called right-wing political party put in place in the United Kingdom to deliver some type of agenda. Is that agenda that we will have the sort of technocracy panopticon that we're now seeing being rolled out in the United States?
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting to note that Nigel Farage is a good friend of Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is a tech billionaire who's the money behind JD Vance. The JD Vance's appointment is very, very unorthodox because he's very young. He's the youngest vice president in about 60 years. They're normally in their mid 50s, and he was only in his 30s when he was appointed. But moreover, he had barely no political experience. Like, he had only been a senator for 1 year. And it was just a very strange pick for Trump, which didn't really make any sense until you look at the money behind JD Vance. So Peter Thiel kind of groomed JD Vance from university, put a lot of money into him, and he has bought his way into the White House via JD Vance. So JD Vance is Thiel's puppet. And if you kind of look up Peter Thiel, it's a Thiel. All the dystopian AI, mRNA stuff he's into, surveillance. He's got a company called Palantir. They're big into surveillance. They've got a contract with our NHS, by the way, all about harvesting our data. He's also a friend of Nigel Farage. So although I see no official evidence that he's poured any money into Farage, I think he probably has, and I think he's going to continue to do that. And he wants Farage in the top job, just like he wants JD Vance in the top job. And so I think that's what we're moving towards. The UK and the US, both basically under the control of Peter Thiel, and then whoever is influencing him, who are probably even worse than he is. And if you kind of do some research into Peter Thiel's business interests, you can see why that's a very, very concerning future for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Palantir is quite one of the most revolting organizations. They seem to have they be totally bereft of any morals. It's and of course we're now hearing stuff about, for example, Google's involvement in guiding weapons into Gaza, and it would appear that the entire Trump front bench team, of course, are behind a lot of these initiatives. They are real hawkish Zionists, for one thing, and do appear to want to pick a war on the back of this sort of anti-Muslim rhetoric. And unfortunately, a lot of the prominent members of the Reform Party are quite happy to parrot all of this nonsense. Do you think that this has been a project in the works for some time, and when did it all sort of kick off? What has created the kind of momentum, if you like? Was it the financial crash in 2008? Was it 9/11, even before that? What was the starting point in terms of our progression towards this highly authoritarian? And of course, we haven't mentioned, amazingly, COVID, of course, in all of this mix. But what do you think was the starting point towards our progression, our rapid progression? Because we're only talking a couple of decades towards where we are today.
I think we have to go back to the 1960s and the highly orchestrated so-called countercultural revolution to make our fairly traditional conservative societies much more liberal. This is a very intensive psychological operation. It was presented as grassroots and pushed by the people, but it wasn't at all. If you look into it, you see all the military intelligence links stamped all over it. A really good book to read actually is called Laurel Canyon by David McGowan, and he shows how the so-called countercultural music scene, with people like Jim Morrison and so on, was a military intelligence operation from the beginning to subvert society, to create generational divides, to turn the youth against their parents. It was all planned. So we've had this kind of bulldozer pushing us towards ever more liberalism from the 1960s. And a lot of the changes that took place in the 1960s, people thought were fairly moderate and fairly reasonable, and they went along with them. But the slippery slope is a real thing. So we've become more and more liberal to the point where society is now, they don't know what a woman is. Children are being mutilated and poisoned and called transgender. We've got all these insane issues coming in and under the liberal flag. So a lot of people who would previously have considered themselves liberals don't anymore, because they say, this is not what liberalism is about. It's gone too far. This is too ridiculous, and they're becoming more and more right wing. So I think we have been set up for a pendulum shift. The pendulum always goes one way and then it goes the other, to push to more extreme liberalism. So to galvanize us to push back and say, now we want a right wing government. Now we want more traditionalism. Now we want more conservatism. So they've obviously voted in a right wing party in America, and we will vote one in the UK. And initially, this will seem to be in our interest, just like Donald Trump has clamped down on the diversity and inclusion program, and he's saying there'll be no more wokeness, there'll be no more transgender children. These are kind of the bait to entice them, thinking, oh, they're still on our side, they're doing things in our interest. But then their real agenda will be brought forth, which is going to be a lot of warmongering, a lot of AI surveillance, endless mRNA injections. But they've kind of manufactured our consent by making us so sick of liberalism that we'll call for a right-wing government at all costs.
Yeah, and that kind of adds weight to the theory that that's why they introduced the the Stargate project so quickly, because it was riding on the back of the wave, the MAGA wave, and the inauguration address and that first raft of executive orders. But the point is that that announcement coming so quickly was probably because they needed to take advantage of the fact that they had this vast mandate and no dissent whatsoever, and people were quite happy given the fact that he was riding roughshod over the woke agenda to slip this in the back via the back door.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, obviously we can all have a bit of confirmation bias of being a bit of an echo chamber. And I think that, we in this movement might overemphasize how important the issue of mRNA vaccines is to the average person. I think overwhelmingly, most people just don't think about it at all. The average person, even if they've been vaccine injured, but they haven't made that connection, thinks, vaccines are good, developments in vaccine science is good. So if they hear about a new mRNA vaccination, the vast majority of people, I'm going to say, at least 70, 80%, are either going to have no opinion on it, or they're going to think, oh, that's good. It's a relatively small niche of us, maybe 20%, who are really exercised about this issue and have are really fully informed about the harm these injections do. And it has made the news, the AI mRNA vaccines, but not the headlines. The headlines is all this more crowd-pleasing stuff, like you said, about diversity and equality, and the transgenderism. So I think exactly as you say, they'll be able to just slip this mRNA vaccine in through the back door. And even some Trump supporters are kind of tacitly supporting it by saying, well, I don't like this idea, but he's not going to force it on us. He's not going to mandate it. So it's all right, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And also, you got the impression, I think we both and the sort of wider freedom community, we're very critical of the like so-called libertarians, like the libertarian think tanks, and supposedly libertarian voices and commentators, focusing entirely after the COVID lockdown and the vaccine mandates and so on, focusing entirely on woke, and ignoring the fact that we had one of the most blatant examples of totalitarian control right under our noses just a matter of months before they started wittering about what, so which indicated to some extent that there wasn't all of this child abuse going on. There weren't all of these little girls getting their breasts cut off. It was very much a media agenda to create revulsion against that. But meanwhile, there's this big jumping bunny of technocracy, which they're going to impose on us.
Yeah, and I mean this technocracy thing, saying, you know, if we're all under constant surveillance, we'll all be on our best behavior. They can sell that in a very clever way. They're saying, do you want to end child abuse? Do you want to end domestic violence? Do you want to end animal abuse? Well, put everyone under surveillance all the time, and all of those things will stop. And you know, if you're not doing anything wrong, what have you got to be worried about by being filmed? Isn't it worth it for all the children we'll save? You know, and they're going to play on that because at the moment it's such an emotive issue with the grooming gangs and the Southport incident that I can imagine them quite easily manufacturing people's consent, saying, "Well, you know, I don't love this idea, but that's obviously what it takes, so we're going to have to do it."
Mary, it's always a pleasure chatting to you. You know, your perspectives on these things are remarkable. I learned so much from you, and as I said in the previous interview with you, I always look forward to receiving your latest massive missive. What's your focus going to be in moving forward? You know, it is exhausting, obviously, kicking against this wave of nonsense that we have to put up with. But what do you think is your personal way out of this? And hopefully that might give us an idea of what people watching this might be able to do as well in order to counter the agenda that's being forced down our throats.
Well, the big thing I always emphasize is the importance of getting off our screens and getting out into our local communities and making real world face-to-face connections with people who live near us. I think that's a really important thing to do. And there are obviously various initiatives to help facilitate. You've got Stand in the Park, which is Sundays, 10 a.m. Dick Dellingpole does Third Wednesday Drinks. He's got like this franchise. If you Google Third Wednesday Drinks, where, you know, open-minded people all over the country meet up once a month and discuss, you know, various strategies and thoughts and how we can fight back. And one thing that I personally do, which is quite controversial, but I think it's worth doing, is I'm involved in local politics. And I've stood as a candidate in the local council elections, I think 4 or 5 times now. I've never been elected, but this does give you a really good platform for getting out into the real world, talking to real people, hearing their concerns and sharing information with them. You know, a lot of people are open-minded and just have no idea about things like, you know, vaccine harms. I can be very interested in discussing it with you. So even if you don't win or don't come close to winning in these elections, you get the chance to leaflet, to canvass, to meet like-minded people who want to come along and support you. And I think that's a really worthwhile thing to do. So I'd just say do everything you can to make real-world local friends and to support each other. You know, buy from each other's businesses, you know, do skill swaps and orchestrate and strategize what you can do at the local level, because that's really where we have power. We don't really have any power to influence what's going on at the national, international level. You know, these top players, prime ministers, presidents, I think they're all intelligence agency creations, and at that level we really can't have an influence. But we can have a real you know, demonstrable influence at the local level with real people in the real world.